Simply economic. Simply economics. Big ideas made small. Everyday money talk for any mind at all. Simply economics. Learn fast, feel smart. One quick listen and you're ready to start.
And today we are diving into a question that seems simple, but it unlocks so much. It's an economic riddle you probably face every single morning.
It really is. We're asking, why would you, a rational, intelligent person, willingly pay $5, maybe $6 for a meticulously crafted, single-origin pour-over?
When, there's a perfectly adequate, maybe even equally caffeinating $1 filter coffee available literally right across the street.
That price difference is huge. I mean, for what is at its core the same beverage. And if you look at it from a purely traditional economic view, utility, the caffeine benefit, it makes almost no sense.
Right. It forces you to admit that price is clearly not the only thing going on here. It's not even the most important factor shaping demand in this premium market.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly that. How did coffee evolve from just a simple commodity into something way more potent?
Into what the sources call a form of cultural capital. We're going to trace that path and show you how culture can subtly, but powerfully override that classic economic logic.
And it makes certain choices, like buying that expensive coffee, way less sensitive to price than the old formulas would suggest.
Exactly. The source material for this is a fantastic blend. It really forces us to connect classic economic ideas, supply, demand, all that, with concepts from sociology and even anthropology.
It's a truly interdisciplinary look at why we buy what we buy. Okay, so let's start where any good analysis should. The economic starting line.
That's right. If you open any Econ 101 textbook, the factors driving demand for anything, but let's stick with coffee, are pretty straightforward. You got price, you got consumer income, and then there's this third thing, consumer preferences.
And the first two are easy. They're numbers. You can plug them into a model.
Right. But that third one, preferences. That's where the hard analysis usually just kind of hits a wall.
It's treated as the black box of economics, isn't it? They're just assumed to be fixed or innate, and the economist's job is to just observe them.
Precisely. And our sources pivot right to that challenge. They ask the crucial question, where do those preferences actually come from?
Because when you look at the premium coffee market, it's obvious people don't just, spontaneously wake up one day with a built-in desire for single-origin beans.
Or for slow pour-over methods, or that intricate latte art shaped like a swan. No one is born demanding a specific bean varietal.
That seems obvious, but it completely changes the game, analytically speaking, doesn't it?
It does. The material is very explicit here. These preferences are not biological. They are fundamentally socially constructed.
Meaning you have to be taught to value them.
You have to be educated, inducted into a culture that teaches you to appreciate and therefore demand these very specific non-essential things. And that's the bridge. That's what forces us to connect economics with culture and anthropology to understand how markets are really made.
Okay, so if demand is constructed, we need a name for that. Social currency, I guess. And that's where this concept of cultural capital comes in. Sounds academic, but it's incredibly practical here.
It's a remarkably useful tool. So cultural capital, it's a concept from the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, and it basically refers to non-financial assets. So things like specialized knowledge, certain skills, or even just specific ways of behaving.
And these things signal your status, your taste, your identity within a group.
Exactly. It's like social currency. Instead of paying with money, you're paying with what you know.
And coffee knowledge has become, it's almost been weaponized as cultural capital today. You can see it everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the specific little bits of information that signal you're an insider, that you're in the know.
It's not just about drinking the coffee, it's about showing you understand it.
Yes. Like knowing the case difference between an Arabica and a Robusta bean, or what a natural versus a washed process means for the flavor, and crucially understanding the hierarchy within coffee itself.
Like knowing what third wave coffee even means. Can you just quickly frame that for anyone who isn't familiar with the term?
Sure. The sources define the third wave as this contemporary movement that treats coffee like an artisanal food. It's all about light roasts, single origin sourcing, super precise brewing, and transparency.
So it's a deliberate move away from the big chains that define the second wave.
Right. And just knowing that distinction and valuing it, that is the cultural capital.
So when you order that high-end flat white, you're not just buying a drink, you're signaling that you have the knowledge to tell it apart from the commodity stuff.
Exactly. And that signal has a direct economic outcome. Possessing and displaying this knowledge directly increases a consumer's willingness to pay a premium,
So you pay more, not because the bean costs that much more to grow.
but because the purchase validates your knowledge. It elevates your status inside that cultural group.
Which connects directly to identity. I mean, that has to be the deepest driver here. People are expressing who they are, not just getting a caffeine hit.
That is a crucial distinction. The act of buying that coffee signals specific traits you want to be associated with. Maybe creativity or education, a certain urban lifestyle.
Or even ethical awareness, right? With fair trade and sustainability, the coffee becomes a kind of shorthand for a whole set of values.
And from a modeling perspective, what's so fascinating is how this symbolic value fundamentally shifts the demand curve.
Okay, explain that.
Well, if demand were based just on price and caffeine, it would be highly elastic. Price goes up 10%, demand should drop a lot.
But it doesn't.
It doesn't. Because when you're primarily buying symbolic meaning, that identity signal demand becomes remarkably less price sensitive. It becomes inelastic. You accept the higher price because the real purchase is the meaning, not the physical liquid.
Wait, so let's make that crystal clear. Are we basically saying that for that person buying the $5 cup, maybe 80% of what they're paying for is intangible?
Yeah.
The status, the ritual, the knowledge.
And the actual bean and water is just the last 20%. That is an excellent way to synthesize what the sources are saying. Yes,
Yeah.
once that symbolic value takes over, the cost of the raw material barely matters in the decision.
The question isn't, is this coffee worth $5?
The question becomes, is participating in this identity and displaying this taste worth $5? And for a growing number of people, the answer is yes.
Which explains so much about how these brands behave. The cafes themselves, they invest so heavily in a very specific aesthetic, that minimalist industrial design.
Absolutely. The environment is the stage for the performance. The design signals authenticity, seriousness. And then you look at the menus. They don't just say medium roast.
No, they give you the whole story. Guatemalan Huehuetenango, naturally processed. It's a narrative, not just a description.
The brand is deliberately selling a curated experience, not just a product in a cup.
It's a perfect case of non-economic things, like architecture and storytelling having a huge economic impact. But let's bring in that anthropological lens, because that's where the price justification really gets locked in, through ritual.
The ritual is vital. Anthropology helps us analyze the procedures. Think about what you actually see in one of these places. The careful grinding of the beans, the precise water temperature, the slow, methodical pour-over.
It's pure coffee theater. The barista is a performer, and you, the consumer, are the audience watching this complex, time-consuming show.
Precisely. And a key observation from our sources is that the preparation is deliberately slow. That slowness is what turns a quick transaction into an event. It signals that this is special. This requires focus.
And that slowness adds a kind of drama, a weight to the purchase. It makes the grab-and-go experience feel almost cheap by comparison.
And this ritual serves a powerful dual function, economically speaking. For the consumer, it creates meaning. It's a meditative moment. But at the same time, the visible effort, the specialized gear, the time, all of it justifies the higher price.
Ah, okay, so the time and the skill being performed right in front of you, that raises the perceived value of the coffee. So even though it's still just hot water and ground seeds, the ritual has completely transformed its market value in your mind.
The perceived value of the physical thing has been deliberately lifted by all these intangible cultural inputs. The moment you're asked to wait 4 minutes for a cup, your perception of its worth just changes completely.
But is there a risk here? Do the sources talk about this? If you go too far down this road, don't you risk alienating the bigger, more price-sensitive market?
That's a critical point, and yes. The sources suggest that while this pursuit of hyper-premium signaling does segment the market, the specialty coffee companies, well, they don't really care.
Their goal isn't volume from everyone?
Exactly. Their goal is high margin and intense loyalty from a smaller, highly engaged niche. They create scarcity and exclusivity on purpose because that just enhances the cultural capital of the product even more. The exclusivity is part of the value.
That makes perfect sense. The goal is differentiation, not trying to be everything to everyone. Okay, so let's synthesize this. Let's bring it back to the core lesson. The key insight from all these sources seems to be that demand isn't just revealed by our choices.
No, it's actively formed. It's shaped by these powerful cultural forces.
So culture is dictating what constitutes good taste.
It's dictating what we're taught to define as high quality and, most importantly, what we are told is worth paying for.
Which means those high-end cafes aren't just responding to some pre-existing demand for fancy coffee. They are actively shaping that demand. They're creating it by providing the ritual, the environment, the whole symbolic package.
And this interplay explains why the premium coffee market keeps growing so robustly. It explains why consumers will tolerate these high prices. In this segment, the cultural signal, that intangible meaning, it matters so much more than the actual marginal cost of the coffee bean.
So we've really come full circle. The big lesson is that culture is this powerful, non-monetary force that directly impacts preferences, the elasticity of demand, and how the entire market gets segmented. You just can't ignore it.
Coffee is the perfect case study. It shows us that markets don't operate in a cultural vacuum. Yes, of course, prices matter, income matters. But the symbolic meaning we assign to things, the identity it validates for us, the ritual it provides, that can matter just as much, if not more.
So the key insight for you, the learner, is this. Economic demand is shaped just as much by cultural identity and social meaning as it is by the price on the menu. If you really want to understand a market's behavior, you have to look past the spreadsheet and understand people, their values, their rituals, and their deep need for identity.
And that raises one final powerful thought that goes way beyond coffee. The study of economics, when you look at it through this cultural lens, it ultimately reveals the hidden mechanisms by which a society decides what things are truly worth. And that link between the cold, hard numbers of a market and our deeply held values. Well, that's the most powerful insight of all.
Something to think about the next time you decide which coffee counter to walk up to. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
That brings us to the end of today's episode of Simply Economics. We hope this discussion helped make today's economic concept clearer and more relevant to real life. If you found this episode useful, feel free to share it with others who are interested in understanding economics beyond the textbook. You can find Simply Economics on YouTube, Spotify, and Podbean. In our next episode, we'll continue exploring how economic theory applies to everyday decisions and real-world markets. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Simply Economics.